What is an API, an application programming interface? It's a way for your apps on your phone or on a website to communicate with the server. The cloud. All the data lives in the cloud. So your computer or your phone needs to request data from that server. APIs are a set of rules that allow the two computers to talk to each other over the internet in a really straightforward way, including data formats and things like that. So say, for example, you need to look up your purchase history on an e-commerce website. You can go to the app, and the app is going to make an API request. It's going to say, hey, what is my order history for all the things that I've purchased on this website? That's an API call to the server. It's really straightforward in that case, right? And the server will then fulfill the request, returning all the data back to your phone in the app, being able to display all of your purchase record history. That's an API. That's what APIs are used for. It's really straightforward from that perspective. Let's take a look at this quick, for instance, example. Like, let's use a restaurant as sort of an example scenario. So you're at a restaurant and you want to make a food order, right? You're going to order some food. You are the client, right? You're going to be your phone. You're the client. You're the phone. You order food. You want a hamburger, let's say. Okay, you tell the waiter that you want a hamburger. And the waiter is the API. The API will then fulfill your request, taking it back to the kitchen, which is going to be the server. The server is going to make and prepare your food for you, and it's going to bring it back to you, and it's going to deliver your hamburger, your food, your order, deliver your lunch. So that's the whole point. The client will order the food. The waiter, the API, will go fetch that food, take the order to the server. Server is going to work on it. And that's really how it works too. The cloud server actually has to do work to prepare your food. It gets all the data from the different data sources and then brings it together on a plate package that the waiter can bring back to your table. And there you go. You've got food. So if we were going to break it down, here is the simple walkthrough. So a request, an API request, is done by the client. This is usually a mobile app, a website, or another service. So let's just keep it on top of your mobile phone because it's pretty straightforward. You can send a request to the server using the API. And this request typically includes specific information about you, which the server needs to be able to fulfill the request, right? So you need what the order is, who you are, what table you are, so that way everything can make it back to your device, your phone, your mobile app. The server receives this request, processes it, and retrieves the necessary data, and then performs the required operations in order to fulfill exactly what you asked for, right? You've ordered something, so the server needs to put the data in the right spot, pull all the data from the right spot, and then say it worked, right? That's the response. That's part 3. The server then sends back a response to your device via the API, which includes all the information you requested and information or confirmation of the requested action, because it can go further, right? You can order food, or you can even say, oh wait, cancel that order. That's another API call, right? And so that allows you to send that data, send that request to the server. The server will say, I acknowledge, I confirm the requested action was completed. All right, let's do another walkthrough, a whole nother story, weather app. We've got a weather app installed, and the app sends a request to the weather API, asking for the weather for your location. The weather service processes this request and retrieves the current weather data for your location, then sends it back to your app. That's an API. The app receives this data and displays the current weather to you on the app's UI on your phone. That's basically what a very simple API is. The API needs to know your location, and then it can pull that information from the database and then deliver it back to your device so it can display it on the screen. I like that example because it's really straightforward from a weather perspective. You request data and you get response. The APIs can do a lot more. You can do a lot more with APIs. Essentially, they allow different systems to work together, making it easier for developers to build complex functionalities without needing to start from scratch every time. They can use APIs by other service vendors to make their app better, stronger, faster. They also can handle specific tasks like payments, data retrieval, and communication between multiple users. So if you have in-app communication like chat, for example, this is also an API that is fulfilled communicating between two devices. You can have two devices that appear to be talking to each other directly when in fact they're both using APIs communicating with cloud servers that exchange the data reliably between the two systems. Let's take a look at a simple app that uses an API in order to facilitate a game, all right? A game like rock, paper, scissors, but it keeps going. It goes further than just rock, paper, scissors. It's like what beats. Well, let's start out at the beginning. So make sure to use your Chrome browser dev tools. You can do this by clicking, I believe it is, where is it? Under View, Developers, Developer Tools. And then that will, of course, hide it because I already had it open. All right, so reopen it again. And then go to the Network tab and then click Fetch XHR. This is going to be API calls. They're going to be recorded in this section. So let's actually try it out. So there is a form here that says what beats rock, paper is pre-built in. So I click Go. And then the Versus API is called, which is pretty interesting. So this means that I get this data over here. Let's just kind of zoom in on the data. So the response, let's see here, is here under preview, and it says paper covers rock. Duh. Okay, my guess wins, which is the response. So what happened here was the API shows here, let's see here, it's the Versus API. Inside the Versus API, we can see that there's a GID, it's probably like a global ID of some sort, my guess, which was paper, and then the previous element, which was rock, and then that is my API call to the server. The server sent back a response with data, a cache count, which just tells you how many people have guessed the exact same thing that you guessed. An emoji that's related to it. Did I win? Was I correct? And the answer of why you were correct or why you were wrong. That's the API in this case. What's even neater, let's take a look. You can play with this API by right-clicking, click copy, and then copy. It's copy as curl. You can copy as curl here. So when you click that, that's going to let you open up a terminal window and then paste that directly into the terminal window, and you should get back the API response directly there. All right, it opened up a terminal window where I can paste in the curl command. It's a lot of stuff. Now, the reason why it's including all these things is because most APIs provide some sort of rough security mechanisms that prevent you from programmatically accessing the API, which consumes resources on their end and causes them to spend more money. And so they'll usually build in some protections. But this gets around that completely. You don't have to. You can immediately, because it has all this included security data like the cookie and some other things like user agent, then you will be able to easily make this API call and get back the data, the exact same data that we saw in the web browser. So this is kind of along the lines of API hacking in a way. So what's interesting is if we take out some of this information. So like, let's try this. Let's take out the user agent, which is this string that makes it look like the request is actually coming from a web browser, when in fact I'm programmatically accessing it from my terminal. If we remove that line and then try to make the API call, it'll return an error, essentially anti-hacking sort of techniques that are being used, which obviously we bypassed immediately just by copying and pasting the curl from the Chrome browser. So what you can do if you want to simplify, obviously it is looking for a user agent, and so you just need to make sure that's there. However, some of these other things are definitely not needed. Like, you wouldn't need this. So you might not need this, you might not these things, you don't need that. We know we need the user agent. Now, is that enough? Can we get away with it in this case? Yes, we can. So we actually reduced the overall number of headers. All these dash H's here are HTTP headers, which is just extra text that's included with the API call. So we probably could even get rid of accept language, accept content type. Let's see if that works. Does it still work? It does. It still works. So we can probably get rid of a little bit more and just simplify the API call. And now we can use their API, even though they didn't want you to use it. You can use it now. This is one interesting way that you can play around with. Okay, so let's actually try it. Let's play the game, but using the API only. So my previous guess in this case was paper, right? And what beats paper? All right, let's say fire, right? Let's try fire. Is it going to work? Yes, it worked. Okay, so I'm able to play the game from my terminal window, even though it was designed specifically to prevent me from doing that. I can do it. And this is what an API looks like. This is an API call. This is all the text that's sent from my computer over to the server, the whatbeatsrock.com API, right? API, the Versus API. This data is sent over to their server, and then I get back the response of, did I win or not? That's an API, and that's how that kind of works, and you can use their API. Sometimes businesses will provide an API playground that will allow you to test their API without having to copy and paste a whole bunch of things, and you can just easily test the API by clicking a bunch of buttons. For example, OpenAI gives us an API playground where you can simply send a request and get an answer back through their API playground really easily. Now you can go a step further and to the docs, which makes it easy for you to copy and paste it in your language of choice, like Python here. It's giving us an example of their completion API, where you can do what I did in the API playground. And I do think that there is a code copy button here where you can take as the curl, a simple curl, and we can copy that and get the exact same output that we had before. So all we have to do is open our terminal window here, paste in the request, and then I had to play around with it a little bit here. So for the message, it needs to contain a little bit of extra data. So the role is going to be the user, my content is hello, and then you can submit the API call and it comes back with the answer, hello, how can I assist you today? So we've just used the API provided by a vendor, and it was really straightforward and easy to do that. Now we can sort of programmatically, from a computer app perspective, we can develop an app that will leverage this API and give us the ability to add sort of an AI communication aspect into our application. It's really straightforward. Just by leveraging a vendor's API like this, it makes it really seamless and simple. Now, there's a lot of options, of course, with that API. You can add in a whole bunch of different things. So you'd want to go over to their references and their guides and docs, and you can see what other options are available and what do they mean. So you can have information such as different parameters that change how the API is going to respond to you, what options are available, are there any limitations that you want to impose. So it's good to, as the next step, go over and read the API documentation to see what's available to you from the vendor or the provider. Now, obviously, in the case of the game that we might have looked at a little bit earlier here, they don't provide any docs on this because you're sort of hacking the API by looking under the hood and copying the data directly, though it's still essentially the same thing in this case.